Alright, so thanks to the CRX community, I was able to get a new OEM mirror for the CRX. Now the guy on the community did sell me the entire mirror, and all I did was remove the glass. Pretty clean, there's like no scratches or anything on it. You know, the storm, all it really did is knocked off the glass. And when I look at the one that was sent to me, you can see we have scratches right here. So it's not the end of the world, but I just thought it'd be way easier to just change the glass and stay with the original mirror that came with the car. And there we go, the mirror is installed, everything's tightened down. Put a little bit of grease on that little ball joint I was talking about, and it's all set. It moves freely, works good. Now the mirror on the trim right here isn't in best condition. I think the one that was on my car was in better condition, but when it comes down to OEM CRX parts, beggars can't be choosers, okay? I'm just really grateful to be able to get a replacement. I just finished installing the tow arm on the driver's side, as you can see. So that's all taken care of now. Finally received my replacement caliper from Rock Auto. I just want it to be working. That's it. Maybe in the future I'll come back and paint it, but it's zinc coated, so it's gonna stay protected. Now if they had options for ones that were not coated, and that definitely I would just paint right off the bat, because it's gonna start to rust immediately. But I paid a little bit extra for the zinc coated one because I know I don't feel like painting this right now. I just want to slap it on the car and have it working. Previous video I was complaining about how, especially on the driver's side, the brake pads were not making good contact with the rotor. You could tell it's not making a full contact with the rotor. So one of my subscribers pointed out that it must be the caliper bracket, or the caliper in general, that's not sitting flat. So I decided to look at the hub, and remember, this has been POR'd 15, okay, so it's not spray paint. And I decided while I'm in here changing the brake caliper, I might as well look at this bracket right where the caliper bracket mounts up to. And you can see right here, this may be hard to tell, you can see I have a big old glob of paint right there, or the POR 15. So this, for the most part, all looks flat, and then I have a big old glob of POR 15 right there, and not so much on top right here, but there is a little bit. So yeah, this could be contributing to why the bracket is not sitting where it's supposed to, and that's what causes uneven wear on the rotor. So I'm just gonna go at this with a Roloc disc and clean up this painted surface until it's bare metal and get it nice and flat once again. Alright, so there we go. As you can see, I got the two mounting surfaces nice and cleaned. And this POR 15 stuff is no joke. It does not come off like spray paint does. Like, I actually had to pull out an actual grinder with a really aggressive sanding disc on it to get that stuff to come off. So it's definitely not like spray paint. But yeah, surface is nice and cleaned up, and now I could go ahead and put everything together. I'm actually going to spray this bare metal with not POR 15, with the CRC. That goes on as thin as water, so it's not going to affect the angle that the new bracket's going to bolt up at. Everything is installed and put together 100%. I bled the brakes ready, and there is a massive difference, I tell you that. With nothing being applied, the rotor really does spin freely, like it's just floating, okay, between the pads. It made a massive difference for cleaning that POR 15 off of here and getting a solid mounting surface so that the bracket isn't at an angle and the rotor would just spin perfectly, okay? And I pulled the emergency brake cable right now, and first of all, the handle itself, or I want to say the parking brake, because people leave comments on my video saying, hey, it's not emergency, it's a parking brake. Whatever. Right now I have the parking brake engaged, and this thing is locking up. It's holding how it should. So let's go in the car and disengage that parking brake. Yeah, I got the inside all taken apart right now. Look at that. That is nice. Okay, I'm loving it. So before I actually take it out for a test drive, I know this side's good. After double checking everything, the brakes feel absolutely fantastic, okay? The brake pedal has never felt better on this car. I'm super excited about that. And the parking brake handle, it just feels perfect. It has that tension behind it that you know it's doing something. You know, it doesn't like click all the way up and it just feels loose. No, it only goes up like a quarter of the way, and you could feel the pressure of it actually engaging the parking brakes. It feels amazing. I'm super happy with this. And this is what I like about putting out these type of videos like this about the CRX, and little problems that I'm having, because even something as simple as having paint on a surface that's supposed to be metal to metal gets overlooked. You know, I did not think to look at that, and I put the video out and people start commenting, hey, it could be that, and sure enough it was. So this is where the community just super grateful, and yeah, thank you guys for pointing that out. It did fix my problem, and now I'm gonna go ahead and fix it on the driver's side. The driver's side is taken apart, as you can see, and there doesn't seem to be as much paint on this side like there was on the passenger side, but there's still enough to the point where I could tell, or I could see this affecting the alignment of the caliper bracket. I'm gonna clean up the rust that's on the face of the rotor. The back side looks damn near perfect, so I'm not gonna worry about that. You can see I put tape on the sides to not scratch the painted surface. I'm all done with the rotor, as you can see, and the reason why I did this is to give the brake pad a fighting chance. Instead of having the brake pad work to get rid of the rust, I figure I'd clean it off, because it isn't going to do anything but just cut grooves into the brake pads. So the face looks good, the back side looks good. I'm just going to go ahead and hit it with some brake parts cleaner. Okay, so I cleaned up what I could. You can see the surfaces are, what the hell? There's always hair in my videos. So you can see the mounting surfaces are nice and cleaned off. And yeah, we went ahead and hit the rotor. Both sides of the rotor are brake clean. Now I'm gonna go ahead, pull the pads off, and just try to give them a quick cleaning, get any surface rust that's on them, get all that off. This side is all done, everything is put back together, and I'm just gonna go ahead and pop the wheels on it and take it out for a test drive. Just took the car out for a test drive, and the brakes are absolutely amazing, the best I've ever felt them. I could tell that everything's working, and I could sleep at night because I know it works. The emergency brake, or the parking brake, also works very well. So the rear brakes is officially done. Don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm out taking the car for a test drive, so I decided to stop at Culver's to pick up some ice cream, and the brakes feel absolutely amazing. And the parking brake, same thing with that. Feels great, holds the car just like it should. I'm really happy with everything. One thing that's really annoying to me is while I'm driving around, every bump I hit, my spare tire is bouncing around back here because it's not being tied down. And anyone who watched my previous video knows you know, the amount of rust that was here and nut on the back side, how I just basically had to cut it off because it didn't want to come off. So this thing was all bent up, and I just came at it with a hammer to try to flatten it out. So this carpet, I cut it out a while ago. I'm just kind of roughly, you know, cut it to fit right here. But as you can see, I got the little hole right there, right? So if we put the spare, just like that. So here goes the cap that would sit right there. And then, you know, I figure I just found a nut that fits this, and I'm like, okay, but the problem here is the nut. If we put it underneath this piece of metal right here, there's nothing to hold the nut in place so you can thread it in. That nut could easily move out of place. It'll be a nightmare. Just, it won't be fun because the nut's down there bouncing around. You need something that's gonna thread in, that's gonna stay in place. So that's where I came up with my next idea. Now, before I get there, my full idea here to fix this is to completely, when I get my new welder, completely cut off this bracket in here, make a new one, and weld it in place with the appropriate threads to accommodate this, and it'll look nice and it'll function perfectly. But until then, I'm just going to use my riv nut, and I found one that threads right into here. So this fits inside of here perfectly, right inside of there, and go ahead and riv nut that in place, and it's gonna lock it down So when I put this piece on top, we have somewhere that's fixed to thread into. So I hope that makes sense. Hey, if I can't pull it out like this, I'm okay with that. Nope, it won't pull out. Okay, I'm okay with that. So you can see, like I said, there's not a lot of metal to grab onto, but it's enough to hold it. Like I said, temporary fix. So we should be able to put this now. You can see it is kind of at an angle. It's not coming directly straight up, and that's mainly because the bracket itself is bent. So this thing is not gonna sit on here perfectly flush. It's gonna be at a slight angle, but it'll do what it has to hold it down. Just gotta find a hole now. My natural instinct is to keep turning it until it wants to stop, but at the same time I don't want to push it. Right now there's more than enough pressure on it. This thing, spare tire, is not moving. I think I'm gonna call it and leave it how it is. Yeah, that feels snug right there. Alright, I'm gonna consider that a win. Alright, so that's it. It's looking pretty good. This is basically part one of putting my interior back together. Alright, so I spent some time to clean up the CRX, and everything is pretty much buttoned up. As you can see, everything that was taken apart is put back together. Everything has its screws in it. So I'm really happy. If you're wondering why I don't have the passenger seat in, it's just been out of the car for so long that I'm just lazy to put it back in. I got it right there in the garage. But it's nice to see the CRX back together. It's been way too long that all of this stuff has just been thrown inside of here. And I'm kind of eager to take it out for another test drive to see if I took care of the noise back here of that spare tire just kind of bouncing around. So I'm just going to go out for another drive. I've been driving the CRX for the past 2 days a little bit more than I normally do. And it was enough for me to notice a problem. I was hearing a clunking noise like metal on metal coming from the front right side, okay? And it sounds like something is loose. So I was like, okay, I gotta check this out immediately, because if I left something loose, it can't be good, right? So I took the wheel off. I started inspecting everything that I've touched, which is pretty much everything. And on closer inspection, I noticed, okay, see the body of the car and then the piece of metal that has a stud on it that goes through the body so you can tighten it down. I noticed a slight gap right there. And when I looked on the one on this side, it really didn't have a gap. So I came up here, removed this fuse panel out of the way, and this nut right here for the upper control arm, I was able to unthread the nut with my fingers. That's how loose it was. So every time I hit a bump, that's what was clunking around. So I took off the nut, cleaned the threads with brake parts cleaner, and put some thread locker on it and torqued it down. So I figured while I'm in here, I might as well check the other side. So I go to touch it, and sure enough, the nut was loose. I could just remove it with my fingers. Same thing, brake parts cleaner, thread locker, torque it down. It's not going anywhere this time. I don't think this was a case of it came loose or vibrated loose. No, none of that BS. I simply just forgot to tighten it. I make mistakes just like anyone else. So that sucks, but the good thing is I was able to notice that something was wrong right away, instead of kept driving and then wait for a failure and wait for something catastrophic to happen and do all kinds of damage, you know, or even crash the car because this thing fails and like the upper control arm falls out. I mentioned this in one of my other videos, why I don't really drive with music on. For the most part, I drive just with no music on, just drive the car. Because if there's something wrong, you'll be able to hear it. If you're driving around with your music as loud as you could be, you're not going to hear the little clunkings and little noises that you know aren't normal. And it lets you get down to the bottom of what's going on. Another win for not driving with the radio on. So I'm glad I was able to find this problem quickly. I'm going to go ahead and check that side. I'm not having any noise on that side, but it doesn't hurt to check it. So I'm all done with that. The one on the driver's side, everything was all tight over there. I got this plate frame here from Drag Cartel from when I bought their cams or camshafts. And the CRX front plate has no license plate frame on it. So I'm going to go ahead and install this on front just because I think it looks a little bit more complete. Looking good. Yeah, about this, I'm still just I don't know what to say about that. I up, you know, what are you gonna do? But this is part of the reason why yesterday how I was kind of reassembling the interior, and you know, I wanted to bolt down the spare. I'm trying to eliminate rattles, so when I do hear something like this, I know something's up, you know. But if I got everything else, I got the spare tire rattling around, I got all these interior plastics, interior parts that aren't screwed down in place, like the radio. When you're driving and all that stuff is rattling, it's kind of hard to distinguish that from this. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to get all that stuff put together and bolted down inside, because it led me to this problem right here. That's not good. Oil light just came on while I'm driving. So it's time to do the tie rods on the CRX. Here goes the original parts. Now I didn't feel any play or anything in them. It's old, right? Everything else is getting replaced, so why not the tie rods? Especially if it's gonna go in for a wheel alignment. Might as well put new parts. And you can see the boot on the outer tie rod is torn open. Again, no play, but the joint is a little loose. What's interesting is, okay, this side's got like this spring clamp, whatever you want to call it. That looks like original stuff, you know what I mean? And then the back side right here had this on here, which again, this looks like OEM stuff. I don't know how long these have been on here, but this kind of gives you some indication, because usually when you change to aftermarket parts, you know, most people just put zip ties to hold the bellows on. I don't know the story behind it, how old these are, but as you can see, we have new inner and outer tie rods, and of course it's getting a brand new bellow. One thing I have to do is make sure I pack some grease inside of here. It already has grease right there, but in my experience these things can make noise, and then you're gonna end up tearing all this stuff back apart again just to pack it with grease. I've had that problem before in other cars, so it's easier to just pack it right now. The original inner tie rod, see it right there, it has like a locking tab on it. You can see it right there. That's a part that comes off, and once you tighten down the inner tie rod, you bend over the pieces of metal right there to kind of lock everything in place. And the new inner tie rod, check the box, doesn't come with any of that stuff. So maybe they're just not expecting you to use that locking style tab. So what I'm going to do is just put some thread locker on here. I'm going to use a blue thread locker, and of course to make sure you torque it down pretty good, and it should not come off. I mean, most cars don't have this locking tab and there isn't an issue with it, you know what I mean? So maybe that's why they kind of steered away from it. At least my box didn't have a locking tab on it. Alright, so I've cleaned the threads on the tie rod, and I put some blue thread locker. Make sure you clean the threads real good. I use brake parts cleaner for that. So you can see we have a pretty large dab of blue thread locker on it. And also you can see I packed a little bit of extra grease inside of there, nothing crazy. But also you got to clean the threads inside of here. So I cleaned that with brake parts cleaner, and I blew it out with the air gun. So just make sure everything's nice and clean. Got the inner tie rod in place, just accepts a standard 17mm wrench, and you can just put it right on there. I tightened it down as much as I could by hand, and then I grabbed my hammer and I hit the bottom of the wrench a few times to give it some extra torque. It's on there plenty tight, and with the blue thread locker it's not going anywhere. So now I'm gonna go ahead, put the new bellow on it and start making all my measurements, because it's why I took off this whole unit as one piece. I really did not separate or even move the inner tie rod from the outer tie rod, because I wanted to get that measurement and try to get the new setup as close as possible. You don't want it all cattywampus going down the road. Of course it's going in for wheel alignment, but still you want to get it as close as you can. Okay, so the two new bellows, they are different from left to right. So the right side is going to take this one that has this weird like tapered edge on it. One thing I noticed is, looking at the diameter of the old one, it looks slightly larger than this one. So let's see if I can put them side by side. Yeah, it's noticeable. So it's gonna be a tight fit. I mean, it should fit. You know, it's clearly not this one because it's a different profile, and I looked at the one on the driver's side and it does look like it matches this one right here, so that's not it. It's gonna be a tighter boot, and because of that, I'm gonna grab some silicone paste right here and just kind of give it a good greasing inside of here. Before you attempt to put this boot on, you want to make sure you turn your steering wheel all the way to whichever way is going to compress the rubber boot. You can see I have it fully compressed right there. So I have to get in the car and turn the steering wheel completely the opposite way. And what that's going to do is apply extra pressure back here, and it's going to help you get that boot on. At that point, I used a pick. What you want to do is get behind here and just kind of work the bellow on to the rack and pinion. You want to make sure you don't stab the bellow with this sharp end, so just be really careful with it. You could even use a flathead screwdriver if you wanted to, a small one. But basically, just work your way all the way around it as you rotate the bellow, and eventually it's going to walk itself on. And as you can see, I've already gone ahead and put on the zip tie. I think this tighter fitting bellow is actually better because it has a better seal around the rack and pinion, so I think it's gonna, you know, protect it a little bit more from like water and things getting inside of there. So that turned out nice. Could go ahead and turn the steering wheel completely back how we had it. It's like the only time the CRX ever has power steering. So now we got the steering wheel all the way turned. You can see everything looks perfect. Now this is a zip tie that was supplied with the kit to go on this side, but you can see this thing's like pretty Mickey Mouse, you know, it's flimsy. So I'm gonna just use a larger one that I have here and go ahead and put that right on there and clamp it down. But everything's looking really good, really happy with this. Yeah, when I take this in for a wheel alignment, they're going to see it out in the parking lot, be like, oh, old piece of junk, everything's going to be rusty and crusty, it's going to be hard to do a wheel alignment on that car. And they're going to be surprised to find out pretty much everything is brand new, and a wheel alignment on this car should be a walk in the park for them. So the zip tie is in place right there, already cut it. The jam nut is already tightened down. And like I said, I just used the measuring tape to get it to the approximate length that the old one was. Of course, steering wheel is going to be crooked when I drive it, but that's what the wheel alignment's for. Anyway, so I went ahead and cleaned off this face right here, the top and the bottom. There's just so much buildup right here. Just went at it like with a flathead screwdriver to clean it off, and then the wire wheel. As you can see, it's looking pretty good. So I'm happy with the way how that turned out, and now we can just put the outer tie rod on it. So the book right here says 33 pound-feet for the outer tie rod. So let's go ahead and get that done. Any second now. There it goes. It clicked. Alright, so I think that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and put the wheel on it. My painted lower control arm is looking pretty dirty, but that's just the rust protection. I have a video coming on that also. I completely stripped down the lower control arm and I put new bushings in it, so it looks great, and really happy with it. Alright, so now that it's all torqued up, I went ahead and put some glue on it, and all I'm using is this disc brake quiet. Yeah, it's made for brake pads, but it's actually just like a real minor glue, okay? And what I'm using it for is, or the reason is because, as you can see, this does not have a cotter pin. It just has, it's just a locking, a lock nut, okay? And I really don't like that style. I prefer the type with the cotter pin. So what this stuff does, it's a small amount of adhesive, nothing crazy. It comes right off once it dries if you just peel it off. But more importantly, it serves as a quick indicator. So if that nut were to start backing itself out, I could easily tell if the nut has moved. So I decided to mark the inner tie rod right there, as you can see, but that's gonna get moved anyway when the alignment guy comes in here to do his alignment, you know. Just want to make sure he touches and he does my alignment correct. I'm watching you, Mr. Alignment guy. or woman, hey, I'm not judging, you know, or person, thing, I don't care who it is, just do my alignment. So at this point, when it goes in for wheel alignment, everything on the suspension on the CRX is going to be pretty much brand new, except for one thing. The lower ball joints are still the original ball joints that when I bought the car. There's no playing them or anything, but I do plan on changing them. But I'm gonna wait until I actually go through with the swap and I got my axles in order, and you know, be 100% sure that I'm gonna be using these spindles, because it just turns into a whole mess of things that have to play nice together. Almost forgot something. Someone mentioned that I should be sponsored by CRC, and yes, I should. So this isn't gonna do anything besides give it a little yellow tint like that. It's not a big issue, but it is gonna protect from corrosion, because even though these things, I think they're like nickel plated or something, I mean, it's rust. It gets to anything, okay? And for some reason, my RPM gauge stopped working. The car's running right now, and absolutely nothing out of it. Great. From one day to the next, because it was working last night.